How are large companies managing and recruiting their workforce in the age of the gig economy? Can cognitive tech help marketers connect the dots and better understand their customers? Will we require architects in the future to design our buildings, or can we ask our bots to do that for us instead? AI and cognitive technology will impact all corners of the business. For procurement's category managers, technological advancement provides the chance to reinvigorate the profession and develop innovative ways of working. But there is also legitimate fear of the major disruption that AI brings. Which services and industries will we lose entirely? How many roles will be made redundant? The cards are up in the air and procurement prosperity is there for the taking. Can category managers help the profession to scrub up and seize this opportunity? Today we've enlisted the help of a category management expert to advise you on how to clean up your act and get the most out of AI. Hello, I'm Tanya Siri, founder of Procurious. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm joined by Lewis Guile, Global Category Manager, Design, Construction, Real Estate with IBM. With almost 10 years of experience working in procurement and almost 20 years prior to that as an architect, Lewis has 3 decades working in construction under his belt. He has made process transformation the hallmark of his career, developing and enhancing capital procurement standards and processes for over a dozen Fortune 500 clients. Thanks so much for joining us today, Lewis.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to kickstart our discussion by asking you to briefly define some of the terms associated with Industry 4.0. Even though we've been talking a lot about it on Procurious, I know there's still a lot of confusion around the difference between AI, cognitive, RPA, blockchain. So please explain.
Sure. So when we're talking about AI, the abbreviation stands for artificial intelligence, as we know, and it's really the way that computers are starting to take on some of the more mundane duties that we as humans perform. Now, when I think of AI, I don't really just think of AI in the context of procurement. I think about it in context of our entire world. And these technologies are impacting everything that we do. The construction industry is benefiting greatly from AI, and I hope that it will continue to do so. When we're talking about cognitive, we're really talking about computer learning, right? And the way that a computer can take a set of very simple commands and expand on that technology to make itself, I'm going to use the word intelligent, more intelligent about how it processes information. That happens over time, and it's based on a series of scripts. I'm not a coder, so I'm not going to get into that part of it, but that's essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about cognitive. And when we're talking about blockchain, we are really talking about an entirely new way of documenting transactions. This can be as complex as tracking how, a diamond is mined and then processed and sold to a simple transaction between 2 people. And it's sort of like a global ledger, if you will.
Well, thank you for those great descriptions. I'm sure that will help everyone just get their head around this topic for today's discussion. When we sort of think about old world and new world, what are some of the time-worn challenges that category managers have faced, and how do you see these changing into the future?
So before we started to have these elaborate forms of analysis through artificial intelligence and such, the only way to uncover certain aspects of a organization's spend habits and their tendencies was simply through experience, right? You would have to be within the organization for a certain amount of time. You would have to get ingrained in the culture and understand how that organization or how that company operates. And you would eventually glean that information and recognize there's an opportunity there, and we have to address it. With AI, it's giving us the ability at the front end, when we first meet a client, to take their data, add it into an AI dashboard, and start to see the trends even before we have gotten acquainted with the client.
So how is that going to play out for category managers? Can you give us an example there?
Yeah, we've had several instances. So IBM is, as you may know, at the forefront of this, and one of the really valuable insights we start to see from this kind of early analysis is we start to see opportunities where we can target what we used to call it low-hanging fruit, right? The opportunities that are ripe for us to go and realize savings. In a recent example, we had a client where a client that we were able to analyze their spend over various geographies. It's a global client, and they had hundreds of sites, and we were able to see that their spend over time actually increased. And it was sort of the fifth or sixth site where we saw that spike. And the data alone didn't tell us why that was happening, but it did give us a clue as to some place where we should be looking, and we wouldn't have known that at that level of the relationship. We would have had to have uncovered that over time being with the client, but we were able to take historical data and see that trend in a way that we previously wouldn't have even been looking.
Fantastic. Well, maybe, I'm intrigued because I've never really been close to managing a design and construction category. So I'm sure that our other listeners are interested too. What is it like to manage the design and construction category? What does it entail? What sort of challenges do you face?
Well, I love construction. I love everything to do with design and construction services, and the challenges are unique to every project, and I think that's really what I like the most about it, right? I could be doing a project for the same client, and the delivery strategies, the pricing models that we use from one project to the next could be completely different. And we do that because we're essentially reacting either to the environment or to the conditions of the project. The scope of work is always different, and that keeps the category pretty fresh.
So are you designing and constructing buildings for IBM or your customers?
Oh, for our customers.
Okay,
I've been most recently working with some of our internal folks, but for the most part, my purview is our clients.
Mm-hmm. And so does that go from residential, I imagine not residential, but industrial, commercial? Is it mainly warehouses, or are you building tall buildings in cities? What sort of construction projects have you been working on?
Yeah, it really does depend entirely on the client and what the client's core business is, right? We have clients that are in the manufacturing space, and so right now I'm actually working on a project, a manufacturing plant in Malaysia. We have other clients that are in the process of building office spaces, and we might be working with them, really in all geographies. So it really covers the gamut from office space, which is pretty common because just about every organization has office space,
at the moment.
all the way to yes, at the moment, to manufacturing and warehouse space, like you mentioned.
Great. Well, while we're talking about your category, which is where I'd really like to take the deep dive, how are you seeing AI impact what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so AI, again, looking at AI, you have to look at AI in the broader context of the world, right? Not just in how do we analyze data. Data analytics is important, and it gives us clues, right? It doesn't give us the answer, right? We still need to come up with the answer. As category managers, you need to rely on your expertise to take data that you see and figure out where to target yourself, and then obviously, and then later on figure out what the root cause or what the solution would be. That's not likely to change, but when we are looking at AI and all these innovations, we really do need to start to encourage our suppliers and our vendors to bring forward the kinds of technological advances that are happening in construction for the benefit of our clients.
And are most suppliers using this technology so far?
Really, there's not a whole. There are some. I'm going to call them glowing examples around the world of small innovators that are really using new technology to the fullest. But what I find is that because we're still in a cost-driven type of environment, we really want to encourage our suppliers to bring forward technologies. Sometimes we even want to make those technologies be separate from our typical scope of work, right? If I ask an architect to provide a scope of a price to design an addition to a factory or a warehouse, they're going to give me their least expensive way of doing that because they know they're in a competitive environment. Well, if I give them now an option or an opportunity to bring forward some kind of technology or innovation, where they're more inclined to do so, and it's making that extra effort or putting out that extra effort of inviting the innovation that will bring it forward.
There was a lot of talk, and still is obviously, about 3D printing. Is this going to, and now of course 4D, 5D, is that going to be a huge game changer within your category, and if so, how?
Well, 3D printing, there's two things there. The first thing is in printing technology, 3D printing technology. It's actually being used to design steel bridges today. There was a bridge that was built in the Netherlands recently that it's a pedestrian bridge, but it was entirely 3D printed out of steel, and that's entirely new technology. That's leading edge, and that wouldn't have been realized if they hadn't been trying to use that technology, right? If we had just gone to the market and said, give us the best price for building the steel bridge, they probably wouldn't have invested the money in the equipment and the space, because this was done off-site in a shop. It was 3D printed a piece at a time, and then it was put together and then brought to the site. And that's how that technology is being used. And we see that happening on a variety of different products as well, where 3D printing is being used.
And what is five-dimensional printing? What is 5D?
So that's actually about, it has to do with BIM technology. BIM stands for Building Information Modeling. BIM modeling, this is on the design side, where architects, as I mentioned, the least expensive way to design a building today is to just put it in AutoCAD on a two-dimensional drawing, a very traditional blueprint type of construction document. But there's this new technology, and I say new, but it's really been around for quite a while. It's just now that it's really starting to gain momentum, and it is BIM modeling. It's a three-dimensional representation of the physical space, and we've seen beautiful sculptural images from architects before, but those were really static, and they didn't have data. These BIM models are rich with data, and the 3D models, they have specifications and properties actually written right into the design, which allows you to do clash detection, where if you have a piece of steel running through a piece of duct, you can identify that in the office before you even get out to the field. The way we do it today is some guy has to go out there and trace out where his ducts are going to be and make sure he doesn't hit a piece of steel. With 3D BIM modeling, we can do that. And the next level of BIM is the 4D and 5D, which is where we start to add time and cost.
Right. Those are the dimensions, the important ones. Now, what about robots? I mean, are you getting a lot of robotic construction, and how is that being used, and is that resulting in dramatic cost savings?
There are some bots, some robots, and automated technologies being used in construction, mostly when we're talking about modular construction, off-site kind of construction. On-site, there are some robots that are being used scarcely. The biggest technological advancements that we see in construction are actually having to do with drone technology. So we have the ability to use drones today to do inspections that years ago would have meant weeks of building scaffolding and 5-10 men going out there, all the harnesses, and risking people's lives. We don't have to do that anymore. We just, we take a drone, we fly it up along the edge of a building, and we can see what exactly is going on with the building.
Fantastic. Anything that helps improve safety is always a good thing. So maybe if we move to talking about implementation, actually using AI to develop strategy for the categories out there, the category managers. Any advice there? You talked earlier about spend trends, things like that.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing about getting engaged with AI, we really need to start thinking about data in different ways. So first, let me talk a little bit about preparing for data analytics. Everybody who's ever worked with a data set knows that data is only as good as the entry, right? The entry of that data. So
yep, garbage in, garbage out. I remember that.
That's right, and that old adage still holds today. If we don't take the time to normalize and clean up our data, the insights that you're going to try to glean out of it are not going to be valuable, or they're going to be incorrect. So when we start doing any kind of AI implementation or data analytics, the very first step is data cleansing, and that could take a long time. Today, we still don't have automated ways of doing that. It's still a bunch of people who have to pour through the data and check for obvious mistakes, normalize supplier names, etc. And that'll get better as the technology gets better. You talked about bots before. IBM is implementing bots to help with purchase order processing. We do this for many of our clients, where we eliminate the human aspect of having to check a PO against an invoice, and that process becomes automated so that your data gets better actually as a result, because now the bot is automatically checking, it's transferring the data into the data set, and that just gets done pretty automatically.
And
The next,
yes, thank you. Yes, I was going to ask another question. Keep going.
well, I was going to talk about the next thing to making data analytics valuable, and that really has to do with benchmarking. We have to define what we're going to benchmark against, and without that information, it really, the analytics is only as good as a historical view back. And as I mentioned earlier, you can glean some data out of a historical view of your data. You can glean some insights from that, but you can't really measure yourself well against the market if you don't have certain benchmarks. So you need to define in advance what those benchmarks are going to be. So for construction, it's pretty straightforward. There are certain costs per square foot that we can evaluate. And then, of course, there are other metrics such as competitors' performance, right? If you know what who your competitors are, you can start to bring in benchmarks that reference you against your competitors. And those are new ways of sort of evaluating your company's performance.
And Lewis, what about site selection? Does AI help with that?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of data that's available for evaluating different types of real estate. Pro formas that were typically done by hand by a team of real estate consultants can now be done pretty autonomously by just a push of a button. You can gather information about demographics, the average income of the demographic pool, availability of workers, cost of real estate, cost of land, cost of construction can all be factored into site selection criteria.
I think that'll be a real boon for some of those property developers out there. Even if you're not managing this category, that sort of intelligence will help maybe people make some money on speculative property investments into the future. The other thing reading, the other thing I've been reading about, obviously sensor technology and other sort of Internet of Things developments are really going to change, everything from, not just buildings and property, but machinery, anything to do with the facility, it's pretty wide-ranging. So can you just talk about how sensor technology is going to impact your category?
Sure. So sensors, when we talk about sensors, we can talk about them in a number of different ways. Beginning with the most basic types of sensors that detect the performance of equipment. So if you're putting in an HVAC system or any other kind of system, these pieces of equipment can now be purchased with IoT technology built right into them. So combining those with BIM models, we talked about earlier, BIM modeling, the 3D models that architects provide, you can bring that BIM model into the facilities manager's database, and the IoT technology can speak to the BIM model. So when something goes down, not only do you know that it is going down or it has gone down, you can pinpoint exactly where that piece of technology is. So the worker doesn't have to go out anymore and sort of trace out where that piece of equipment might be, or take down half a dozen, or half a floor's worth of ceiling tiles to get to the problem. He knows exactly where that thing is, where he has to go and work. So those types of sensors, they are very valuable to facilities managers, and obviously you can integrate them with your building management system so that you can have your building management system can turn things on and off remotely or on schedule so that you can save energy and not have as much utilization. You can see break-fix history of that piece of equipment so that you can determine when a piece of equipment needs to be replaced, so you can be more proactive and eliminate outages. These are sort of the ways that you can monitor your systems with sensors. The other way that sensors can be used is by detecting occupancy and either turning systems on and off to save energy, or for facilities managers who are looking to optimize their environments, they can use that occupancy information to determine where more offices might be needed, more conference rooms might be needed, or less conference rooms may be needed. And then there's a whole nother area, which is iBeacons. iBeacons is an entirely new area, which is really exciting. And by the way, all of these Internet of Things kind of data goes back to the concept of good data in. These things just automatically generate data, and you can rely on that data so that you don't have to worry about the human error of capturing that data. But going back to iBeacons for a second, iBeacons, sort of like, if you all remember the movie Minority Report, where, you know, where the protagonist would walk into a mall, and they would read his retina, know immediately who he was and what his preferences were, and how you know, to present advertisements for him. Well, that technology is with us today. It's not in the form of reading your retina, but the iBeacon technology, what it does is it reads a low-level Bluetooth technology off of your cell phone so that it knows who you are. And retailers are using this information and they basically, these readers go around their store and they detect just how long you are actually standing in front of a display. And if you return back to that display and they take that data now and they optimize their retail displays to make sure that they're putting their best products forward.
That's spooky. That's Big Brother.
It is.
But we all talk about work-life balance, so why don't we sort of flip this conversation a little bit and talk about the impacts of what you're seeing on work and home. Firstly, home, like, will we be seeing all these technologies translate into our residential property as well?
I mean, I think so. In fact, personally, I'm looking for ways that I can implement some of these things into my own home. Simple things like monitoring when doors are opened and closed, right? If you have teenage children or even young children, as I have, knowing when they open the door between the time of 11 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning when they should be in bed is a perfect use of this kind of technology, right? And then obviously for safety, if there's a storm coming and you have a window open, you could be alerted that the window's open. You have to, and a storm is coming, your phone knows that the storm is coming because you're connected to the weather system. And now you know your windows are open, so let's go close them. There's all kinds of ways that we can apply these kinds of new technologies to residential applications and make our lives easier. Sensors associated with coffee machines, right? They've been around for a long time, but we can apply that to a bunch of other things, like sensors of lights in your house that you can turn on and off when they're not being used. There's all kinds of applications that could be used.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about work? Firstly, are we going to be in offices or aren't we? You know, there was the push to get everyone out of the office to save costs and work from home, but now we're seeing a lot of major organisations now insisting that their employees come back into the office. So you're sort of mapping out the future office space for a lot of people. What do you think the trend's going to be?
Well, I think what we all appreciate is a comfortable work environment. It used to be defined as a enclosed cubicle that gave you your private area, and you had a certain square footage of space that was all yours, and you could decorate it however you would like, and you had your computer just the way you wanted. Today, we're looking for more flexibility. So sit-stand desks are all the rave. Everybody wants to have the option to stand up when they can. But more than that, we want the flexibility of being able to work wherever we want to work. So I've been in multiple kinds of environments. Today, I work from home, so I don't have an office space that I need to report into, but I do travel to many different office spaces. And each one of them has its own character and its own look and feel, but they're all moving towards this agile work environment where you don't have a dedicated desk anymore. You simply go up to a desk, you put in a code, or it might be an iBeacon off of your phone or a thumbprint on your hand. It could be anything, and all of your desktop preferences come up on a dummy computer that just has, that's connected to a cloud. And if you do have a sit-stand desk, it rises up to your preference. And if you want to take a meeting, there's telephone booths available and casual seating available where you can go and either have a casual conversation if it's not a private one, or go into a private room and have that meeting separately. So we're definitely moving away from having your own private environment, but also moving towards a space that is more flexible.
What about on the warehousing and distribution side of things? I kind of felt like we were very agile and sort of having distributed manufacturing and sort of downsizing, but now you read about Amazon having these huge distribution centres, so I'm kind of mixing manufacturing and distribution there. But similarly, what do you think the future holds for the construction of those sort of facilities?
Well, so our clients are still very much looking for just-in-time kind of delivery of things.
Yes.
We are not trying to, everybody doesn't want to have their own warehouse stocked with furniture and tables and whatever it is that they use. They want to minimize that as much as possible and put the onus back on the vendor. So vendors can't centralize. They can't be in one location and expect to be able to ship from that one location around the world. They do have to build distribution centers around the world that can serve the customers that they have, and the ones that they don't have, the ones that they're seeking to win. So when we work with big companies, big distribution companies, big manufacturers, they very much are aware of these things, and they are building more and more distribution warehouses so that they can store goods on an as-needed basis. Of course, they require some kind of insight, going back to data, right? We want to have projections for them that tell them just how many square feet of office space we're going to build, and just how many, approximately how many card readers we need to have on hand, and so forth and so on, so that they can be prepared when we're ready to make our next move.
Fantastic. Well, we've had a great conversation and we're running out of time, so I thought maybe one last question, which was, what advice would you give to any of our listeners who are category managers? How can they sort of clean up their act and leverage the value of AI with how they manage their categories?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the first and foremost thing is we can't be afraid of the future. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people are worried that this AI revolution is going to eliminate jobs, We've heard of this for decades with every new advent. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is for those of us that are able to adapt to the new way of working, we're going to find redefined ways of working. We're going to find new ways of serving our clients and being smarter about what we do. The jobs that are going to go away are the mundane, simple, repetitive tasks that nobody really enjoys doing. So those of us that are in this profession and other professions are going to find ways to be more strategic in our day-to-day. We're going to be more, we're going to be able to be more thoughtful because the mundane things are taken care of, and we're allowed to freely think and come up with innovations. We're not going to replace architects. We're not going to replace contractors. These people have creative roles in the workplace that are still needed. No matter how good the technology gets, no matter how many bots we put in, there still has to be humans that are running those bots, feeding those bots information, and even in procurement, category managers, we have the expertise, we have the knowledge. Yes, there's going to be web crawlers that are going to be collecting data faster than we could, but the way that we take that information and now apply a strategy to it, that is going to be strictly a human endeavor.
So being human will win the day. We've been talking about how we beat the bots, so that's a very reassuring message. Thank you, Lewis. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Much appreciated. And for our listeners, if you'd like to listen to this webinar again or share it with your colleagues and peers, it will be available via the Procurious e-learning platform from tomorrow afternoon. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them in our discussion board, and we'll ensure it gets answered for you. I hope that today's webinar has encouraged you to clean up your Category Management Act and inspire you to adopt a few new tricks. Many thanks for joining us today.